Okay, in addition to the discussion that really doesn't happen, it's a tough one because if one opens it up, it's this discussion of, what the function of wealthy people and how they are often employers. And once you open it up, you find that you're dealing with people who revere that reality that they are the kings of their companies and stuff like that. But it's fine. I remember reading a book my father had. We belonged to this book club, and one of them was advertised, and it was the business techniques of Attila the Hun. And it said, "Be the tribal chieftain of your corporation." So I kind of knew that I was going to run afoul of a heavily fantasized human domain. In addition to the discussion, the billionaire's contribution to society is that he or she employs people. Yes, on his or her yacht, where he or she are personally the consumer. In the complex economy we live in, it is the consumer who employs people, not the billionaire, not even the 100,000aire who is not paid so far above the cost of production that the US tax code makes him or her a billionaire. Not to pick on him really, but if the affluent people who buy Teslas stop buying, the people who make them will be out of work. Elon has no more commitment to them once the consumer stops buying. This is as it should be. No, we don't expect the CEO of a bankrupt, non-producing company to keep paying his or her employees, even if they can afford to. The boss today is more usually an investor than a participant. In my teens, I worked at a shoe factory in the East End of London, Jack Rose Shoes. Roughly once every 2 months, Jack would visit in the Rolls, top hat and mink coat. He was garrulous and quick, here then gone. He reminded of a cross between a Monopoly guy and his topper and a Toad of Toad Hall. Owning but totally unnecessary to the success of the factory. That success was due largely to the markup on the shoddy shoes and shops in Oxford Street and the tiny amounts people like me were paid. The morale of the hard-working crew, and hard-working they were, was generated by several extraordinary women on the shop floor. Their, quote, boss was a great Irish redhead I will never forget, Breda. I was 17 and she stunned me. She roamed the floor helping where things got tough. Deadlines make machines lethal. She and her husband took me under their wing, had me round for dinner, made me a Sinatra fan, and the myth of an illiterate, uninterested working class was consigned to its shallow, shallow grave to be dug up and exploited by movie makers ad infinitum. When you pay rent, you are buying the property of the landlord for him or her. If you weren't paying the rent, he or she or they can't afford the mortgage. None of this is judgment on the owner class. It is just getting the definitions straight. In a sense, the employee employs the boss. We have done this once or twice in the theatre. The actors ask the director, employ the director. I know, but it is often a better way to a decent show. The theatre does beg the question, why are they there, directors? The work is done by the actors. That is who you see in the show. You see also a painter's work, a designer's, a set builder's, and the playwrights. Unless it is devised, much very powerful work has been done without directors. A director can have a very important role. He or she can tell the players if the story they are telling is clear, even if it exists, which it often doesn't, and which they almost never do. The contemporary notion of the director is that they are the creative genius. They read the play and decide what it is, how to do it. Then they set about hiring the actors to fit what they see the play to be. Hierarchy is now the truth of the game. And tragically, the actor most likely to be hired is the one the director intuits will best portray what the director has seen in the mind's eye. And that actor has a particular psyche that is quite happy to shelve their own possible invention for the sake of the directors. There are lots of ways of testing the validity and effectiveness of this approach. El Primo would be to see the two different kinds of productions. The great directors will tell you, the honest ones, that 90% of the work is casting and admit the rewards of the production. Salaries, credit, and should, at the very least, be equal. My experience with directors, and I have so many that I love, men and women, particularly the women, but the men tend to multiply the fantasy level of being kings, of being the wise one in the room, of being the one who makes the decisions. It changes how they speak to you, how they relate to you. Very often they'll relate to you differently in the pub than in the rehearsal room because they're constantly asserting that they are the center of attention. And it's a conundrum in theater because the center of attention is usually the actor, actress, the leading actor, actress, unfortunately, but very often other parts in the plays. That's how the plays are made. The boss, creator, employer myth fulfills itself but has no bearing. It carries no weight. In fact, I was hired by a producer of performance at a Ren Fair a few years ago. I ran a Shakespeare workshops. We had a great time in the high and soggy summer. He invited me to a staff meeting with the boss, who arrived late with a list of things he wanted to know had been done on site. They had all been done and more. The employees knew the work, ran the show, were motivated and talented, and probably paid adequately. The boss was unnecessary. Nice chap, born into money, but at a loss as to why he was there, so he often left. The season was a big success. I met the players and worked with a few on Henry V. And the success of the season, the money that flowed happily in, was due entirely to them. Waiting for the mythic boss to change what work is for fools. As the boss archetype grows and those who affect it are obviously less and less capable, the myth of the employer will thicken like soup, and it needs looking at. It is gruel.